My brother recently purchased a farmhouse just down the road from where we grew up. I've spent some time over the last few weeks tearing down the old lath and plaster off the walls and generally gutting the second floor, which was in serious need of renovation. On one of these walls, framed on actual hardwood, was a signature which seems to be from the original builder, who dated it from 1884. The other day I stopped by to see how things were progressing. I happened to look out the window and I saw a scene from the second-story window that was truly beautiful. The surrounding farmland was showing signs of the fall harvest. The corn and beans were nearly golden. The hay was still green, probably has one more good cutting left. And the trees surrounding the fields were turned colors of gold and red and brown and yellow. Down the road, I could see the house where I grew up, where my kids were there carving pumpkins with their cousins. If I had to describe that day with one word, I would say it was good. It was a day to help see through the beauty of nature how God is present among us and how this world could not randomly have happened. And as I stood looking out the window, it struck me. The Democrats want this state to have the ability to take all of that away. This bill is about taking away local zoning. But make no mistake about it, it has a much deeper meaning. The roots that will be torn from the ground are not just that of corn and beans, but that of our heritage. It's not like we can't see what's going to happen. Those of us that live in the country have seen it firsthand. First, they bring in the dozers, changing the topography of the farmland, conforming the natural landscape to the needs of commercial solar production. Then the chain-link fences come in and surround hundreds of acres of farmland, not only from people, but from wildlife, who will need to find habitat elsewhere. Then come in the concrete pads, steel structures, and finally, black paneling. A picturesque landscape is transformed into a monstrous hellscape. Mind you, all of this, from precious mineral extraction for solar panels to heavy equipment needed to prep and install needed infrastructure, is all facilitated by internal combustion engines and carbon energy. The hypocrisy is so glaringly obvious you have to be blind not to see it. The environmental impacts of mining these precious minerals and unknown consequences of swallowing up farmland are serious factors not to be discounted. And now we have to ask the question, for what? For what must we take all this action the Democrats implore is absolutely necessary for the preservation of our species? It is to placate a climate agenda that has become a religion that requires a sacrifice. It would be one thing if these climate zealots offered a sacrifice of their own to appease their ideology, but no, of course not, they won't. They believe in the climate agenda, but only to a point where they will sacrifice the land and heritage of those living outside of town. Well, here's a thought to the masters of the universe aiming to transform our farmland. Your food comes from this land. The Public Service Commission has stated that on top of the 134,000 acres in use or allocated, an additional 209,000 acres of land is needed to reach the Democrats' mandate of 60% renewable energy in Michigan. Altogether, nearly all the farmland acreage in Berry and Ione counties combined will be needed to meet this goal. Guess what will happen if you take more farmland out of production? The supply of farmland will decrease and the cost of leasing will go up. These costs will be transferred from farmers who have low margins to customers buying food at the grocery store. And as anyone who lives on a budget is already aware, food costs are already too high. This proposal will make matters worse. And beyond the dollars and cents, for what benefit are we looking to upend our state's energy production? To lower carbon emissions? I can get on board with looking into the future and supporting policies that utilize our natural resources in a sustainable and responsible manner. I could support a measured and reasoned approach, but that's not what the Democrats are proposing here. They are going with a force radical change now, ask questions later strategy. You would think we have done nothing to reduce carbon emissions over the last 15 years. The advent of unlocking new natural gas production in the United States over the last 15 years, until recently, led to us being more energy independent while facilitating the closure of many coal plants. On top of all that, just remember, we don't control the weather in the short term, and we cannot control the climate over the long term. Michigan rates low for average sunshine exposure on an annual basis. In West Michigan, we average about 2.5 hours of sunlight a day or less during the winter months. When the sun finally comes back out in March, it's like we've escaped Plato's cave. We have a cloudy state with short days for much of the year. It is risky to assume solar will ever fulfill much of our energy need in our state. We won't move the needle enough, or at least not as fast as the Democrat plans call for. If you are really going to go down this road of chasing windmills, let's at least have some intellectual honesty. These facilities could be located in communities that have abandoned factories or other large blighted sites that won't disrupt active farms or a way of life. And no matter what communities these developments might go in, communities should be deciding that for themselves. The state should not be forcing this upon anyone, anywhere. The changes made to this bill in committee do not help. It gives local communities some illusion of power over siting decisions only if they say yes to a project. It's almost worse than the original version, as it puts locals in a position to have their decisions overturned by an unelected state bureaucracy. Bottom line, this proposal crosses a line. It violates the fundamental rights of people in local communities who elect their local leaders to make their own decisions based on what's best for them. I urge a no vote.